It was 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon when Daniel Hayes, a 46-year-old school bus driver from rural Montana, realized something was terribly wrong. The steering wheel felt loose. Too loose. He'd driven this same yellow bus for 8 years, knew every rattle and hum, every quirk of the aging vehicle. But this was different. This was dangerous. Behind him, 23 children between the ages of 6 and 12 were laughing, shouting, trading snacks, completely oblivious to the fact that they were traveling at 55 miles per hour down a winding mountain road with a vehicle that was losing control. Daniel's hands tightened on the wheel. His heart pounded. He glanced at the rearview mirror and saw their innocent faces, and in that split second, he made a decision that would change everything. The road ahead curved sharply to the right. Beyond that curve was a steep drop-off, hundreds of feet down into a rocky ravine. No guardrail, just open air and certain death. Daniel pressed the brake pedal. Nothing. It went straight to the floor. The hydraulic line had failed. He was barreling toward that curve with no brakes, failing steering, and a bus full of children who trusted him to get them home safely. He could have jumped. The door was right there. He could have screamed for the kids to brace and then saved himself. But Daniel Hayes wasn't that kind of man. He'd been a firefighter before becoming a bus driver. He'd seen what happened when people panicked. He knew that staying calm, staying in control, was the only chance any of them had. What happened in the next 90 seconds would be investigated, analyzed, and debated. But for Daniel, it was simple. He refused to let go. This is his story. Welcome to True Heroes, the channel where we tell the stories of ordinary people who did extraordinary things when it mattered most. I'm your narrator, and today I'm bringing you one of the most intense, heart-stopping rescue stories you'll ever hear. The day a middle-aged school bus driver with a bum knee and a mortgage became the only thing standing between 23 children and certain death. Before we dive into the story, if you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. We post every week, and every story is about real courage, real people, and real moments that restore your faith in humanity. And if you're already part of this community, drop a like to help this story reach more people. It really makes a difference. Now I want to hear from you. Leave a comment right now telling me what country and city you're watching from. I love knowing that this community spans the entire globe. Write it down now. Takes just a second. Ready? Perfect. Let's continue. Daniel Hayes wasn't supposed to be a hero. He was supposed to be a regular guy, living a regular life in the small town of Whitehall, Montana. Population 1,038. He'd taken the school bus job after retiring early from the fire department due to a knee injury. It was supposed to be easy, low-stress work. Drive the same route twice a day, chat with the kids, enjoy the mountain scenery. Nothing glamorous, but steady and safe. But on that Tuesday in October 2019, Daniel's safe job became the most dangerous thing he'd ever faced. And what he did in those 90 seconds would prove that heroes aren't born. They're made in moments when everything is on the line. Daniel's day had started like any other. He woke at 5:30 a.m., made coffee, checked the weather, clear skies, light wind, perfect autumn day, and headed to the bus depot by 6:15. He did his pre-trip inspection just like always. Tires, lights, mirrors, emergency exits, everything checked out. The bus was old, sure, a 2007 model with over 200,000 miles on it, but the district kept up with maintenance, or so he thought. His morning route went smoothly. 23 kids picked up from various stops along Highway 55, dropped off at Whitehall Elementary by 7:45. He spent the middle of the day doing paperwork, grabbing lunch at the diner on Main Street, and swapping stories with other drivers. Nothing unusual. Nothing that suggested his life was about to change forever. At 3:30 p.m., Daniel climbed back into the bus for the afternoon route. The kids piled on, noisy and energetic as always. Little Emma Martinez sat in the front seat like she did every day, telling him about her science project. Brothers Jake and Connor sat in the back, already arguing about whose turn it was to play video games when they got home. Everything was normal. Daniel pulled out of the school parking lot and started the familiar route home. First stop was the Henderson farm, then the cluster of houses near mile marker 12, then the long stretch of mountain road that wound down toward the valley where most of his students lived. He'd driven this route hundreds of times. He knew every pothole, every dip, every place where deer liked to cross. About 15 minutes into the drive, as they climbed up toward Benson Pass, the highest point on the route, Daniel noticed the first sign that something was wrong. The steering felt spongy. Not completely unresponsive, but not right either. He frowned, adjusted his grip, tested it gently. It felt like there was play in the system, like something had come loose. He considered pulling over right then, but they were on a narrow shoulder with limited visibility. He decided to make it over the pass and stop at the wide pullout on the other side where he could safely investigate. It was just a mile away. Surely he could make it that far. It was a decision he would replay in his mind 1,000 times. As the bus crested Benson Pass and started the descent down the other side, Daniel felt the steering get worse. Now it was genuinely loose, like the wheel was barely connected to the front tires. His pulse quickened. Behind him, the kids were singing along to a song someone was playing on their phone. They had no idea. Then, as they approached the sharpest curve on the entire route, a 90-degree right-hander with a cliff drop-off on the left side, Daniel pressed the brake pedal to slow down for the turn. His foot went straight to the floor. No resistance. No response. The bus kept accelerating down the hill, now doing nearly 60 miles per hour. His training kicked in instantly. He pumped the brakes. Nothing. He tried the emergency brake. It grabbed weakly, but wasn't enough to stop a bus this heavy going this fast downhill. He looked ahead at the curve, at the cliff beyond it, and realized with horrible clarity, if they hit that curve at this speed with no steering and no brakes, they were going over. Time seemed to slow down. Daniel's mind raced through options. Swerve into the mountainside? Too fast, they'd flip. Try to take the curve anyway? The steering wouldn't hold. They'd slide straight off. Jump and save himself? Never. Not with these kids on board. There was only one option left, and it was insane. But it was the only chance they had. Daniel didn't yell. He didn't panic. He spoke firmly and clearly into the rearview mirror. "Everyone, I need you to sit down right now and hold on tight. Right now." His voice had that tone, the one that made kids listen instantly. Within seconds, every child was seated, hands gripping the seat backs in front of them. Emma, in the front seat, looked up at him with wide eyes. "Mr. Hayes, what's wrong?" Daniel met her gaze for just a second. "We're going to be okay, sweetheart, I promise, but you need to hold on tight for me, okay?" She nodded and wrapped her small hands around the metal pole next to her seat. The curve was 200 yards away now. Daniel had maybe 15 seconds to do something, anything, to save them. His eyes scanned the landscape. To the right was the mountain, steep, rocky, unforgiving. To the left was the drop-off, certain death. Straight ahead was the curve that would send them over that drop-off if they couldn't turn. And then he saw it, a small dirt road that branched off to the right, just before the curve. It was steep, climbing up into the forest, barely more than a logging trail. He'd never driven up it, had barely noticed it in all his years on this route. But now it looked like salvation. If he could aim the bus into that road, the uphill grade would slow them down. Maybe even stop them. The problem was the steering. The wheel was so loose he could barely control direction. And to make that turn onto the dirt road, he'd need to execute it perfectly. Too early, and they'd miss it and hit trees. Too late, and they'd overshoot and still go over the cliff. With working steering, it would be difficult. With failed steering, it was nearly impossible. 100 yards. Daniel gripped the wheel with both hands, feeling every microsecond of delay between his movements and the bus's response. He started turning right, overcompensating for the play in the system. The bus began to drift right, but sluggishly, reluctantly. Come on, he thought. Come on. 50 yards. The dirt road was coming up fast on the right. Daniel turned the wheel harder, practically spinning it. The front of the bus started angling toward the turn, but they were still carrying too much speed, too much momentum. Physics was working against them. 25 yards. Daniel made a split-second decision that defied every instinct. He steered left first, just for a fraction of a second, to set up a sharper turn to the right. It was a racing technique he'd learned decades ago, back when he used to drive in amateur rallies before kids and mortgages and responsibilities. He'd never thought he'd use it to save lives. 10 yards. Now he cranked the wheel hard, right with all his strength. The bus's front end swung toward the dirt road. The back end started to skid outward toward the cliff. Everything was sliding, tipping, teetering on the edge of disaster. Kids screamed. Daniel kept his hands locked on that wheel, refusing to give up control. And then, with maybe 3 feet to spare before they would have missed the turn entirely, the front tires caught the dirt road. The bus lurched violently to the right, bouncing onto the rough trail with a bone-jarring impact that threw Daniel forward against the steering column and made the kids shriek in terror. But they were on the trail. They were pointed uphill. And gravity was finally, mercifully, on their side. The bus roared up the narrow dirt road, engine screaming in protest, tires throwing rocks and dust into the air behind them. Daniel wrestled with the steering wheel, trying to keep them centered on the trail, even as the loose steering made every correction a gamble. Trees blurred past on both sides, so close he could have touched them through the window. 50 feet up the trail. The bus was slowing, but not fast enough. The incline was steep, but the vehicle's momentum was still carrying them forward at dangerous speed. Daniel tried the emergency brake again, yanking it as hard as he could. It grabbed, held for a second, then slipped. Useless. 100 feet. The trail was getting narrower. Daniel could see a sharp bend coming up ahead where the trail switched back to climb even higher. If they hit that turn at this speed, they'd plow straight into the forest. But if they could make it around that turn, the steeper grade beyond it would finally stop them. Behind him, Daniel heard crying. Someone was calling for their mom. Another kid was praying. But they were still holding on, still trusting him to get them through this. That trust was both the heaviest weight he'd ever carried and the thing that kept him focused when every instinct screamed to give up. 150 feet. The switchback turn was 30 yards ahead. Daniel knew this was it. The final test. If he could navigate this turn with 0 brakes and failing steering, they'd make it. If not, he didn't let himself finish that thought. He started turning the wheel early, overcompensating wildly for the play in the system. 20 yards. The bus was drifting right toward the turn, but still carrying too much speed. Daniel saw a solution that was completely insane. Drive partially up the embankment on the inside of the turn, like a NASCAR driver riding the high banking. Use the hill itself to help turn the bus and scrub off speed. He aimed for the inside embankment. The right side tires hit the slope and the entire bus tilted at a sickening angle. Kids screamed. The windows on the left side scraped against low-hanging pine branches. For a heart-stopping moment, Daniel thought they were going to roll over completely. But the tilt actually helped. The bus's trajectory curved more sharply as it rode up the embankment. They swung around the switchback turn, all 4 tires now barely on the trail, the bus seesawing violently. Daniel counter-steered frantically, fighting to keep them from flipping, and then they were through the turn. The trail straightened out ahead, climbing even more steeply now. The bus's speed dropped rapidly, 40 miles per hour, 30, 20. The engine was roaring, the transmission was screaming, but they were slowing down. Finally, blessedly, slowing down. At 10 miles per hour, 200 yards up the logging trail, the bus finally shuddered to a complete stop. Daniel sat frozen for a moment, hands still locked on the steering wheel, breathing in ragged gasps. Behind him, there was total silence, and then Emma's small voice from the front seat. "Mr. Hayes, are we okay now?" Daniel's hands started to shake. He looked at her, at all of them in the mirror, alive and safe, and managed to nod. "Yeah, sweetheart. We're okay now." For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the ticking of the hot engine and the distant call of a bird somewhere in the forest. Daniel's hands were still gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. He forced himself to let go, forced himself to breathe normally, forced himself to think about what came next. He stood up on shaking legs and turned to face the kids. 23 pairs of eyes stared back at him, some crying, some wide with shock, some oddly calm. "Is everyone okay? Anyone hurt?" He walked down the aisle, checking each child. A few bumps and bruises from being thrown around, but miraculously, no serious injuries. Jake, one of the brothers who always sat in the back, spoke up with a trembling voice. "Mr. Hayes, what happened?" Daniel knelt down so he was at eye level with the kids. "The bus had a mechanical problem, but we're safe now. I'm going to call for help and your parents will come get you. Everything's going to be fine." He retrieved his cell phone from his pocket. No signal this deep in the forest. Of course. He tried the bus radio. Dead. The electrical system must have been damaged in the wild ride up the trail. Daniel looked out the windows at the dense forest surrounding them, then back at the kids. New plan. "All right, everyone, we're going to walk down to the main road. Stay together, hold hands, and we'll get help." But then Connor, Jake's brother, pointed out the window. "Mr. Hayes, look." Down below, barely visible through the trees, a pickup truck had stopped on the main highway. Someone had seen them. Someone knew they were in trouble. Within 15 minutes, emergency vehicles started arriving. Fire trucks, police, ambulances, the whole response team from Whitehall, a town so small they all knew Daniel by name. When the first firefighter made it up the trail on foot and saw Daniel standing beside the bus with all 23 kids safe and unharmed, he just stopped and stared. "Daniel, what the hell happened?" Over the next hours, as paramedics checked the children and investigators examined the bus, the full extent of what had happened became clear. The hydraulic brake line had ruptured, a catastrophic failure that should never have happened on a properly maintained vehicle. The steering linkage had also failed due to a worn component that had been flagged for replacement months earlier but never fixed due to budget cuts. The investigators walked the route Daniel had driven. They saw the cliff drop-off, saw the curve where he should have gone over, saw the impossible turn onto the dirt trail. One of them, a veteran accident reconstructor with 30 years of experience, told Daniel quietly, "In my professional opinion, what you just did can't be done. The physics don't work. You shouldn't have been able to make that turn." Daniel just nodded tiredly. "Well, I guess physics didn't know about those kids behind me." The investigator smiled grimly. "No, I guess it didn't. You saved 23 lives today. You know that, right?" Daniel looked over at the children being reunited with their crying, grateful parents. "I just did my job." But it wasn't just his job. What Daniel had done went far beyond job duties. He had made split-second decisions that required skill, courage, and absolute commitment to protecting those children at any cost. He'd chosen to stay with that bus when he could have saved himself. He'd executed an impossible maneuver that professional drivers said couldn't be done. And he'd done it all without hesitation. Within days, Daniel Hayes was headline news across Montana and then nationally. School bus driver saves 23 kids in miracle rescue. Hero driver defies death on mountain road. The stories were everywhere. Newspapers, TV, online. Reporters called constantly. People wanted interviews, wanted him to appear on morning shows, wanted to know how it felt to be a hero. Daniel hated every minute of it. He'd always been a private person, uncomfortable with attention. He gave one press conference at the request of the school district, standing awkwardly in front of cameras and microphones, and said simply, "I'm glad everyone's safe. That's all that matters." When reporters pressed for details about his thoughts during the incident, he just said, "I wasn't thinking, I was doing." But the community of Whitehall wouldn't let him slip back into anonymity. They organized a ceremony at Town Hall where he was presented with a Medal of Valor from the mayor and a commendation from the Montana governor. All 23 kids and their families attended, filling the small hall to capacity. Daniel stood on stage, clearly uncomfortable, while the mayor read a proclamation declaring October 15th, Daniel Hayes Day, in Whitehall. When they asked him to say a few words, Daniel approached the microphone slowly, his knee, the one that had ended his firefighting career, bothering him more than usual. He looked out at all those faces, at the parents whose children he'd brought home safe, at the kids who were now calling him their hero, and his voice cracked slightly when he spoke. "I appreciate this more than I can say," he began, "but I need you all to understand something. I'm not special. I'm just a guy who drove a bus and did what needed doing when things went wrong. Any of you would have done the same in my position. The real heroes are the kids who stayed calm and held on when they were terrified. And the real lesson here isn't about me. It's about why that bus had failed brakes and failing steering in the first place. His words shifted the mood in the room. The investigation had already revealed the maintenance lapses, the budget cuts that had delayed critical repairs, the inspection reports that had been filed but never acted upon. Daniel wasn't grandstanding. He was making a point that needed making. Those kids trusted that bus to be safe. Their parents trusted it. I trusted it. And it failed because someone decided saving money was more important than safety. That can't happen again. The fallout was significant. The school district overhauled its entire vehicle maintenance program. The state legislature passed new laws requiring stricter inspection standards for school buses and better funding for transportation safety. Daniel was asked to consult on the new policies, lending his experience to making sure what happened to him would never happen to another driver. As for Daniel himself, he took a few weeks off to recover from the physical and emotional toll of the incident. His knee needed surgery. It had been damaged further during the wild ride up the mountain. His doctor told him his bus driving days were probably over. But the school district offered him a position as transportation safety coordinator, a desk job where his knowledge and experience could be put to use. He accepted, but on the condition that he could still occasionally substitute drive when needed. "I'm not done with kids yet," he told the superintendent. "That bus ride might have been my last regular route, but I'm not ready to say goodbye to them completely." The superintendent agreed, knowing that having Daniel Hayes even occasionally behind the wheel of a school bus sent a message to every family in the district. Their children's safety came first. Daniel never fully embraced the hero label. When people brought it up, he'd change the subject or deflect with humor. But Emma Martinez, the little girl who sat in the front seat that day, said it best in an essay she wrote for school. "Mr. Hayes says he's not a hero, but heroes never think they are. That's what makes them heroes." And that's the story of Daniel Hayes, a middle-aged school bus driver from a tiny Montana town who refused to let go when everything was falling apart. He didn't have superpowers. He didn't have perfect equipment or backup support. He just had courage, skill, and an absolute refusal to give up on those kids. And that was enough. What makes this story so powerful isn't just the dramatic rescue. It's what it teaches us about heroism. Real heroes aren't the people who seek glory or recognition. They're the people who show up, do their job with integrity, and when crisis strikes, they rise to meet it without hesitation. Daniel Hayes represents countless ordinary people who do extraordinary things every single day, often without anyone ever knowing about it. If this story moved you, please subscribe to the channel for more true stories of everyday courage. Leave a comment telling me about a hero in your own life, someone who might not make headlines but made a difference when it counted. And if you know a teacher, bus driver, firefighter, or anyone who keeps kids safe every day, share this video with them.